What's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we're going to be talking about the XRP price chart. While the price of Bitcoin continues to sit in this range as we've just gone through another dramatic weekend. However, there's been a lot of positive developments over here on the XRP price chart that I would like to talk about. Piggybacking on the things that we talked about in the video last Thursday about the structural setup that's happening over here. We've, of course, talked about this in relation to other times we've seen this in the market, whether it's versus Litecoin versus XRP or these battles that happened back at all-time highs, which is what XRP has been doing. Price behavior hasn't been anything different from things that we talked about last week. I tweeted about this on Friday that in yesterday's video, I theorized it seems likely we were somewhere similar to right here. Sentiment ravished after the biggest liquidation in history, and we have a perfect location to beat retail sentiment even more, which of course there on Friday, Bybit was hacked for $1.4 billion worth of Ethereum. They were using multi-sig wallets, but still, the user interface tricked them into sending it to the wrong location. As of today, Monday, Bybit announces that they have fully closed the Ethereum gap, saying that they're backed one-to-one again with their Ethereum holdings. We saw the biggest bank run in recent history on Bybit, but they handled it like champions. All withdrawals were fully paid. Now, I don't know that with 100% certainty to say that that's true. However, I'm on social media. I know how people are. If there was a problem, there would be tweets, there would be retweets. There was none of that. It seemed like everything went smooth for them in regards to processing withdrawals. Now, this, of course, happens deep after this liquidation that took place at the beginning of the month. We talked about it, that sentiment would get ravished, given enough time. Then you start getting the narratives to beat you down. I mean, just think about all the narratives we've had, right? You've had the Argentina stuff happen in there. You've got influencers who have just disappeared now. You've had Dave Portnoy just rug pulling left and right. Now you've got this large Bybit hack. Everybody wondering, oh no, what's going to happen now? And well, I don't have the full answers for you on what's going to happen with the Bybit situation, but I can tell you we're pretty deep into this thing, and it's, where sentiment would normally get really hammered in here. So in today's video, we're going to kind of zoom in on where we are with prices right now to see if we can start seeing signs of a bottom coming in here. For the last several weeks, we've really just discussed that it would be something along the lines like this. When the liquidation started there on February 2nd, it's what I immediately jumped to because we had already been talking about a violent backtest before it ever showed up. It showed up sooner than I thought that it would, but once it started, it just became apparent very quickly. Whoops, we're already in it right now. Let's go ahead and bust these things out, which in the middle of the liquidation, we're already showing exactly how these things play out in here. Showing how these range developments happen in here once that bottom gets put in. Then by the time the bottom got put in, still immediately resorting back to what do these things look like after you go through these mass liquidation events. How long do we chop around? What do these look like? And saying, that concludes our violent back test. Fantastic daily V-shaped recovery like it never happened. Closing the day green. It will likely chop around in here for some time, which is to be expected, which you can see in here on the chart. That's what we're talking about right in here, right? So for the last couple of weeks, it's been difficult to create content not focusing or hyper-focusing on this particular thing. And especially when you're stuck in a range and you think you're going to continue being stuck in a range, it's pretty difficult to come up with something fresh to say. But the idea being that, there was going to be some of this working around to happen in here, right? That these ranges tend to last about as long as the previous one did. And even at that time, being kind of about halfway through it, right? And that it would still be more time to chop around throughout here. And that we were still behaving just right along with how you would for a violent backtest to happen. And that what comes next is really all this chopping. So what we've done to this point hasn't in any way been different from what the idea has been from the last couple of weeks. You could see here, even in the thumbnail that is drawn here 13 days ago, the idea is heading back into those retracements and then pulling all the way back down. And as you can see here in this video, 13 days ago, the idea back into retracements, back down to the lows. Even in these things, I don't see anything telling us that like, hey, this week we're going to break out. This week we're going to go crazy. Even if I just followed structural behavior, I'd be sitting there saying, hey, I think it seems logical to head back into retracements, pull back down here, continue ranging until we can eventually get out. And so that's been the idea here that we've been going through on XRP. And the hard part, of course, has just been pointing to this for the last couple of weeks, that there becomes that push down to the lows. That's why we've been focusing on what these can look like and these ideas in here of how we've seen these play out before, but it seems like we're getting pretty close to where we can be looking for the actual support to be coming in here to actually get this thing kick-started. And whether that's right here or if there's still just one more flush. And so that's what we're going to talk about in this video. I'm going to show things that say, hey, there's a couple of optimistic signs of where we've hit currently this morning, which is about $2.43. Again, last week I kept saying, I don't think 250 means anything. Look at that. We're under 250 today. And the reality is what we've done is just continue to kind of waddle in here throughout the weekend and then go for that plunge down in here, right? So we'll talk about a couple of different things on whether or not, we're really already there. Or if not, that we're already working our way, right? And so this is the concept of the idea that you do have the automatic reaction. We go back into the retracement levels, then we come back down a second time, and then we actually go into the parabola, right? That's what we've got in here. We've come back into the retracements. Now we're pulling back down into the lows. The question is just where's that low going to end up happening, right? For our Litecoin example, it occurs right here. For our XRP examples, it occurs down in here, down near 230, 225. So let's dive in to the entire structure of what's happening in here to see if we're ready to go for that from where we've already gotten to now. Now that a lot of these things have played out, XRP did go back to its retracement. It has started to pull back down. Is that good enough? Let's dive in. Now, the first thing I want to do is just actually talk about all of this price action right in here. And then, of course, we'll just kind of narrow in more on what's going on in here. In the end, what is this? This is a range. And so what we're trying to isolate to find is, one, where is this low going to come in? But two, that it's going to go that way at the end of it. And rather than just being a trust me bro situation by watching this YouTube video, we'll use resources as we usually do to talk about the anatomy of a trading range and phases of Wyckoff accumulation to see if they're showing up in here. So in Jim Forte's anatomy of a trading range, that's where the famous creek discussion comes in when we're in Wyckoff accumulation that includes a spring phase, which is Wyckoff schematic number 1. Where there's a selling climax followed by an automatic rally, a secondary test in phase B, and then a spring that goes and sets a new low. An example of that is back here on Bitcoin back in 2015, where there's really a violent spring that comes in here, taking out these lows, and then eventually recovers its way back up. But in the anatomy of this range, even right here, we see a lot of the classic things that we look for Wyckoff accumulation. The first thing that we look for is the automatic rally, which we have show up right in here off of the lows for Bitcoin. Next, looking for a secondary test, and then one more push back to the automatic rally. There's your secondary test and the push back to the automatic rally. So essentially automatic rally and secondary test. Then we shift over to secondary test in phase B, secondary test in phase B. Then notice we push our way up and we go take out the high from the rally after the secondary test. And then we head into spring, which in this example is LPS, or last point of support. But to make things more complicated, there's two ending versions to Wyckoff accumulation, and that is spring, where all the other phases are the same, but your ending can be different, which is spring that's violent. And spring. That's it. That's the common Wyckoff accumulation. For those who remember, we covered this a lot back in 2022 and 2023, that when the bottom of the market was coming in, that this was Wyckoff accumulation taking place in here. But rather than this being spring, that this was actually last point of support, which instead of this version of Wyckoff, all phases were fine. We were instead getting an LPS, or last point of support phase, to come in for the ending, which is less violent and more just drawn out, boring, with like an A, B, C in here to then recover. That was essentially our story of the cruel summer, but eventually held and went. So the question is, do we actually have something like that happening right in here for XRP right now, that we have an Wyckoff accumulation taking place in here? And can we actually pinpoint all the markers in here of that happening? Well, the first thing I look for is I notice that there was an automatic reaction that came here off of the lows. XRP went down and hit $1.72, and then on Coinbase, in a matter of 30 minutes, reacted all the way back to $2.70, a $1 move in under a half an hour. That would make this our automatic reaction, followed by our secondary test, pulling back down into these lows, then going in for our secondary test in phase B, and then you're left with the ending over here to say, is this going to be an LPS, or a last point of support that just kind of teeters along over here? Or do we have more of a violent spring action happening in here, like we saw over here for Bitcoin? which would place XRP's current price probably somewhere around right here today, which in all these examples that we looked at, right, that's still that spring phase gets you back down in here to where this secondary test in phase B is at to hit those lows. Alternatively, if this is just a last point of support, then we could actually argue we're kind of already there right now, right? Notice over here on Litecoins, an example that we have used, it does also shoot above the automatic rally over here and then pulls back down to eventually find these lows right in here, which, as we can see, that's really what we just did and what we completed here this morning. You can kind of look at the anatomy of price behavior in there, that it pulls back to these levels, bounces. That was the idea of what was going on in here. Then we kind of traverse sideways, and then finally it goes for the plunge, right? It goes for the plunge down in here. I can make the argument for both of them, right? I see accumulation happening in here. It matches everything else I'm looking at going on in the market. Now we actually have Wyckoff making its appearance in here, and I can make the argument for both of them. I really can. I can argue that you're just right there. We're working on this plunge to happen in here. And once this thing concludes itself, we're all done. But I do also see some price behavior that's happening in here that I would also look for to say that we actually have just hit the bottom this morning. One, obviously, this has done precisely that. It's hit the exact level you would anticipate that would be the supportive level for it to come in. But there's also something happening on a really short time frame in here for XRP that we actually look for when we're looking for conclusions to come in. And so you'd have to be arguing that this is an A, B, C happening in here, which is how LPSs come to a conclusion. You have your A, B, and C, and then you go. One thing that we look for when spring is coming to a conclusion is we look for like the crashing structure. And for those who aren't familiar with what the crashing structure looks like, it's essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rolls back up to wave 4 within wave 5, and then boom, you get 6 and 7, and that marks your bottom in there. And then you'll work your way back up. But this is a classic crashing structure with 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for 5, and then back into wave 4 for the conclusion. Now you head down in here and you look at this price action that's happening in here, and we actually do have that all occurring right in here. You have the completed crashing structure happening right here, where there is 1, 2, 3, 4, zoom in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back to wave 4, and the completion. So we have already done the crashing structure here to hit this low. To see that on a different scale of how it's happened here on XRP before, one, we can go back here to 2022, really even after the FTX collapse happened in here and how these ended. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back to wave 4, and then we had our ending. We called that the ending at that time. We were viewing crashing structures at the time. Go back, check the tape, January 2nd, January 3rd, that was the bottom, we knew it. Another time will be the famous time of the 22.5 cents for people who are here back in 2020. And that would be this right in here when we were waiting for 22.5 cents. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back, ending. That was the bottom. So mix in the fact that we've created this kind of crashing structure here over the last couple of days to kind of conclude this thing out, mixed with a really negative narrative. Price has also done all the accumulation schematics and reached back down to the price level that we would anticipate that a support could show up in at. Right in here, I think you have a fair argument to being optimistic that this level is a bottom. And that here you are on Monday, February 24th, and today marks the day of the beginning. We can see in there, price escaped the range. It escaped the range, went up here and took out the automatic rally, took out the automatic rally over here, whichever one you want to say. Price pulls back down again, pulls back down, and then concludes itself by giving one more rally, waddling, and then boom, right back into the levels, when you'd be looking for an LPS to show up. And when we do see the crashing structure emerging just right in here, which is typical on endings of Wyckoff ranges. So there's a little bit of me that's kind of hopeful that, was that good enough? A lot of my thoughts have been really that we've needed to come down in here because that's just how they typically go. When we look at things like Ethereum or you look at XRP's historical behavior, it's pretty common that you do just pull all the way back down in here into the 220s again for these types of ranges. But one comparison we've been using, because it's been really incredibly similar, has just been that to Litecoin. And you can see that even all that price action in there really just did the exact same thing. And now today it's hit the exact same level, and it did it with a crashing structure to conclude it. For the argument of it heading back down to these lows into the 220s again, right? That's what we do tend to see. Sometimes it doesn't get that low, right? We've also shown what Ethereum did back at its all-time high back in 2021, where it did something big like this. It had a big liquidation event that happened in here, right? Notice where prices pulled back down into in here. That is where you are currently right now as well for XRP, right? With it not pulling back down to these areas. So for the last couple of weeks, the discussions have really been that we're just going to kind of be ranging in here. But now we're starting to kind of reach actual levels where a lot of things have started to already play out now, right? We've already gotten to that point where all of this has now happened in here. And now isolating, where is that bottom going to come in? Right. This is exactly what we thought was going to be the case in here, because it's typically what ends up happening in here for these types of ranges to play out. The thing is, we always have like just varying levels of degrees of where that bottom can come in here. And there's lots of just different factors we can look at in here to see, which one are we mirroring? How are we behaving? And I think we are all kind of on watch now. That's just it's been 3 weeks of this. It's been saying, ranging, continuing. Even when we said on Friday, the discussion on Friday was, I don't think 250 means anything. It's probably still going to go a little bit lower. Now we are at the point of it's like, all right, can the bottom show up now? Can we actually get the rally to actually sustain some legs in it? And I do want to be careful with that, because when we get this far into it, now we're 3 weeks into this range developing after you have the liquidations, after you have all the Argentina, the Dave Portnoy, the Bybit hack, right? Everybody's emotions get put on an edge. So the second you start being like, hey, like this could be the bottom. And then if it does end up still spilling like this, and it does have to hit these levels, people's emotions are just beyond broken, right? Have a big picture. This has been the idea on this channel for weeks now, that this would be the type of behavior that we're having in here. And for the last 3 weeks, it's been a big discussion of it being ranging, that we'd probably pull back up into the retracement levels and then pull back down. We are now entered into the phase of being like, can we actually find the bottom that is actually going to give this thing juice to sustain itself to go push now? This is still out there, that could happen. So I can't wash my hands of that and say it won't. But I see a lot of things in here that look awfully similar to what endings do actually start to look like, right? And this is how this one did end. So I think that's really kind of the messaging. Does it look like Wyckoff accumulation? Does it have all the phases of Wyckoff accumulation in there? It appears to. And can we find examples to use that this was the bottom? And in this circumstance, it was. This was the bottom in this circumstance. And then rather than just saying, hey, it's like in this circumstance, it hit this level, it was the bottom. It's like, all right, well, its price behavior is structurally similar. Yes. Can we find something that looks remotely similar to things that we talk about on this channel, like crashing structures? And yes, we see that happening in there too. So could that spill continue? Yes, the spill could continue, but I don't think we're looking at it through the same lens as we have been for the last 3 weeks, that it has to keep going down. Like even on my last video, I don't think 250 is going to hold, because there's nothing important about 250. However, this 243 level, 242, yeah, that could end up being it. If it's not, and it still plunges lower, it just means we're still just continuing to go along with this, right? And that it's not unreasonable that would end up happening in there. But we've moved beyond being like, hey, this is ranging, retracing, coming back down to the lows. And we're now entering into the phase of being like actually looking for real bottoms to start to form to actually get the rally going. And so I'm actively hunting for them, actively looking for them. Here's what I see right now. I'm not coming in here to tell you with 100% certainty that's it, but there's an example where it was. And I'll have more macro discussions later this week. But we're even seeing something that's very interesting over here, even on the DXY, is that we're now back into the 106s. And so it's kind of that big moment too in here of, is it going to get through 106? Because if it does get through 106, that's when we tend to see our bull runs happen in the market. It's when we get above these 106s that things and trouble starts to brew, which, as you could see, once we catapulted off of 106 definitively, that's where all the problems have been. So we'll save that for another video, but macro wise, do you have something kind of starting to show up in here? And we're going to kind of find out here in the coming days and see how that thing reacts. And as you know, my thoughts are always, we have to have macro cooperating at the same time for these things to end up happening, but that we've now gotten what we would be looking for. And there's the potential that's good enough. There's the potential that it's still just that phase right now. But the thing that I would tell you that would signal to me that I would come on here and say, yep, I do think that was it. I do think that was good enough is simply if price got back up in here. If price got back to like 265, for me, that would tell me that was it. It would mean that this isn't a breakdown to go plunge these lows at this point. It means we found some support. It's going to waddle in here. It's going to continue doing this choppy stuff here for a minute, likely. But it means that the support came in and that this is not in the picture. So today and tomorrow, it's just to see, hey, does this react in here? And if this gets back to right here above 260, if it gets above 260, then I will come on here much more confidently and say, you know what, I think that was actually it. Right now, I'm like, hey, I think there's a chance this is it. It's reasonable. Still kind of waiting to see if that thing is going to take that spill real quick. We have a crashing structure that emerged on here. We've hit a price level that you would think could be reasonable for it. And these are things that we've been talking about for weeks. We've done everything. We've done all the boring stuff. We've done all the hanging out the lows. We've done all the retraces. We've done all pulling back down to the lows. Now we're trying to isolate. Is that it? Is that good enough? Can we actually get it kickstarted? And if that's been different messaging for the last 3 weeks. It's been about this thing continuing, this thing reaching its end. 250 doesn't mean anything. Now, are we good? And we might be, but we'll watch this in the coming days and hopefully we can get things going. It's never fun being in a range. Ranges last for everybody wants to see trending behavior. They either want to see it break down or they want to see it break out. And nobody wants to see things go sideways for a while. But my thoughts have been that it was going to be sideways. And it gets really difficult to create content during that environment. It's probably why the content has been a little bit more spottier in regards to videos being every day, because I just don't know how to phrase it any differently. That, like, one, I think the range is going to break to the upside, but two, we have a lot of chop to do first. And it's pretty difficult to make that as sexy as possible over and over and over again. But we're getting to a point where it's like, all right, are we good enough now? Here's one example where it was. This is still in the cards, so we just kind of got to be careful in here. But if it does happen, then I'll just immediately be like, all right, that's cool. That was good. And I think the next move is really going to kind of tell us that. Either we start shifting back up and I'll just sit there and say, yep, cool, we're good. That was likely it. We are likely done. Or then there just becomes some quick little liquidation that happens in the market. And then in that point, I'll say, okay, cool, that's it. I think we're done. Either way, I think we're really, really close on being done with having these conversations and being done with talking about there still being more chop and more thoughts that we would still pull back down even after retracing. And we've all had to be kind of patient during all this. Of course, after liquidation, it always makes it really hard on everybody emotionally. And then with all the random news just happening every single weekend. But I do think we are very close. We have now done, like, just from a time perspective of what a range would look like, we're really approaching that point of looking for the bottom point of it. Whether that's just one spill of a liquidation to happen right in here, or if there's a reaction that comes out of this level that we're at right now. Either this level is going to get marked by a bottom, or we're going to see that little spill happen to mark the bottom. And I think that will happen. Hate guessing time. I really hate it, but within the next day or two. And then it's all about just posting YOLO Moon Boy stuff after that. So we're almost there, but all right, that's going to be it for this one to kickstart our week, you guys. I want to thank you all so much for watching. You can check out my newsletter over here at blockchainbacker.substack.com. We dove into all the price behavior that happened there early February, showing how the high volume came in there on those. We talk about what always ends up happening after you have that. Sentiment goes into the trash can. It's nothing unusual. This is what happens after every liquidation. But the positive signs that showed up in the market there when that event occurred were fantastic. So check this out over here at blockchainbacker.substack.com. Comes with an audio recording that I record myself, which is 42 minutes long. You can check out bcbacker.com with over 40 videos and 11 hours of content teaching you how to set up your own charts and indicators within TradingView and CoinTrader Pro. There are links in the descriptions of all of my videos, like to the newsletter at blockchainbacker.substack.com and to bcbacker.com. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice, and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.